Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing today, Rabbia?
I'm very well, thank you. Just happy to be here, centered, and very excited um, based on my new purpose and wanting to move ahead with this new uh, inspired way of doing things, which is to actually empower women.
I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
So let's look at your story. I know you're writing a book, but what were the opening chapters of your life?
Well, if I look at my life, I always put it in different, I've actually put them into different stages. So I call it when I was a little young girl, how did my life unfold? And thereafter, building on my life story, and then, of course, going into reassessing my life, and then, of course, going into my 50s,
Yeah.
and then, of course, then you move on.
Yeah.
All right, as a kid, I think having come from a Muslim environment, my dad was a very tough individual. And then my mom, on the other hand, was this very soft, kind, but resilient woman. So having both of that in a very big family, 7 brothers,
Wow.
and we were 10 children, and having that, the strength of my dad and looking at how we were brought up in a very, very strict environment, and he ran his own business. Although he was very strict, there was a lot that happened behind the walls of our home, which was my dad ran his business from there, so which empowered us, and we watched as he ran his business. Because he was very vibrant, he was an entrepreneur. We were exposed to how businesses were run. My brothers, on the other hand, through grit and through hard dedication and all of that. We as young kids, so we were the youngest, my 3 of us, we watched as they grew up. And we watched and exposed to that. We weren't allowed to go out and have fun, and so just exposed to adults,
Yeah.
which actually helped a lot. And my mom, on the other hand, helped my dad. Having that and that softness, so, the combination of both my mom and my dad helped me personally. I could talk about myself, to basically have a bit of both and how you can combine both, in terms of going forward in your life. During my, when I moved into building myself, at that time, in my 20s to 30s, I got married, had a child, worked, and entering the work environment, I entered into a very Afrikaans environment that was, at that time, it was an insurance company. The manuals, even the computers were all in Afrikaans, so it was quite something
Daunting, I'm
different,
sure.
yes. And being exposed to that, and of course, working yourself up into, and knowing that there was a lot of resilience that you needed to build as a person, and you needed to shine, or else you're not going to be recognized for anything.
Yes.
So, you needed to be very, very resourceful. And I watched and I observed, and I said, I need to really put in that dedication and the commitment in order to rise. So fortunately for me, I did, and I had a good innings at Sanlam. Thereafter, I moved into various roles, which was fantastic for me. I was very fortunate that I had a sponsor as I moved through my work experience with APSA, and I was recognized, and I was fortunate in the sense God was always with me, and I excelled. I Before I went to university, but I quit very quickly, and I managed to convince my brothers that I don't need to be at university, but they made me promise that I will study. But during that time, I got married, and we moved to Cape Town, and of course, then the world just changed completely for me.
Okay.
I just excelled. Fortunately for me, I was able to move up the corporate ladder very, very quickly. And then again, I had a sponsor, sponsor meaning someone in the company recognized, which was the head of distribution. So they always recognize, here's this black woman coming from KZN and working in a very, very Afrikaans environment, which you had to battle, you had to fight your way to get to the top. And, I wrote whatever exams, did my postgraduate, and moved up the corporate ladder. And circumstances changed. I moved to Johannesburg with 2 little kids at that time. And again, fortunately for me, I was headhunted by ABSA and moved up the corporate ladder, identified as talent, had the opportunity to go on an accelerated development leadership program, which was for the top 18 of ABSA. So during that time, I developed the most amazing skills in empowering myself, and I just loved every aspect of it, managing big teams. Unfortunately for me, because of my exposure with my brothers and my dad, and living in the same sort of house where there was a lot of laughter, a lot of love, but at the same time learning how to handle guys, not realizing that I'm going to require this later in my life. And here I had 40 financial advisors, a huge area, the Vaal, the South, the city center, in Johannesburg, looking at Sandton, and here's these Afrikaans men. I recall one of them actually telling me, he says, when you walked into the room, you said, this young lady is not going to make it with us. It was, when he told me the story, I just laughed. But fortunately for me, having had brothers, I was able to communicate. Having a dad that I did, was able to speak to them at the level that was required. And I had the same interest as they did. I loved sport, I loved cricket, I loved soccer, I loved rugby, so I was speaking their language. And at the same time, the business acumen was there. So that was the most amazing experience for me, because I just excelled. I qualified for a number of the accolades, the overseas trips, both with Sanlam as well as ABSA, working a black female in a very Afrikaans environment was not easy.
Yes.
But nevertheless, it worked well for me. And thereafter, moved on into I moved into different positions, and then, of course, I decided to take on a consulting position and open up my own business, and moved on from there. Yes, and worked with different companies, also, in a strategic role. Also got the opportunity to work on overseas in America, and something very different, on a ship where I worked closely with the executive team, managing and mentoring and coaching development managers there as well.
That is impressive.
Thank you.
So right now, how would you say you're doing both personally and professionally?
Personally, I can say in my own Zen bubble, a feeling of gratitude. And, I'm going to share with you because you like personal stories. I gathered that by listening to what you've said. I often look at my life and I say, at each point, the Almighty has always guided me. And I could never slow down. I was always I could handle, being a single mom, I could handle 50 things. I mean, I had a huge team all over, and managing 40 financial advisors. I opened the Financial Advisor Academy for ABSA. I did lots of things. It was the first. It was one of the biggest initiatives, the second biggest with ABSA. So, I could juggle lots of balls. And suddenly I was coveted, and I got sick. And then after I started consulting, I said, this is not keeping me busy enough. But then I said, God slowed me down. And I said, I wonder why he did that. And then I basically watched my life and I said, you know, God just told me you can't do 50 things. Now you need to slow down and start reassessing your life. Hence I say during your 40s to 50s, you start reassessing your life and you're saying, what is it that you need to do? How do you plan? How is it that you can relook at your life and reposition yourself? So having said that, about 3 weeks ago, I was a little confused again, and I said, and I got very ill, and I said, and it was like COVID. And I said, what is going on? Why is this happening again? And I was alone at home. And for me to be in bed is, I mean, I don't do that. And I sat in bed and I said, Ya Allah, what is going on? Why are you doing that? And then I realized I'm juggling between, do I go back to corporate because that is what I do and I enjoy doing? I go to consult. Or do I change my purpose completely? And I had these two juggling because I've created a financial wellness offering. And this is obviously to enable individuals in terms of getting financially independent, not necessarily women, everybody. And I said, now I need to find my purpose again. And of course, I realized that this is happening because, and there was a calling out there, and hence I'm saying I am now at a point where I'm in my Zen bubble because I realize that now I'm very excited that I know I need to empower people. And like a niece of mine who's in America, she's done extremely well. And she said, Rabbia, do you really need to work in terms of earning? You are a single person, your kids are big. Do you need to make more money? What is it that you want? I said, I want to serve. And I was like, thank you. Thank you to the Almighty. I've got my answer.
So this workshop, this financial wellness workshop that you've created, is that based on you struggling being a single mom and becoming financially independent? Is that where it originated?
So if you look at my life story, I always helped and served people. And as a financial advisor at some point of my life, I was a financial advisor there too. I actually gave back a lot. I did a lot in terms of upliftment of people. During my time at APSA, I had a number of managers actually reporting into me. And I developed a lot of people during my lifetime, both at APSA and at Sanlam, and uplifted a lot of people, management as well as junior people. So when I re-looked at my life, I said, you know what? And yes, to answer your question, I became financially independent because what I had done was I had a very expensive hobby. I loved financial planning. I realized the importance, and I uplifted so many financial advisors as well as their clients. I built them to the point where they did extremely well. And that is why APSA asked me to develop the first advisor academy for them, because we needed to transform, and there were no black financial advisors. They needed to bring on blacks into the environment. And they said, you're so good at doing this, so help us. So then I decided, when I got back from the Royal Caribbean, that was 2 years ago, I started assessing what is it that I need to do. And then I said, this is what I love doing, and uplifting of people. And looking at my life, I said, I've become financially independent, so why can I not share this and do this? And that's how I created this entire thing in terms of giving back and looking at, because a lot of women and men for that matter, they do not realize that, in terms of different stages of your life, what happens, if you look at, for example, you start off with a job, then there's tax. You're paying tax. You have benefits if you're working for a company. What is the meaning of your employee benefits? How do you understand your pension funds? How does it impact you? Looking at your medical aid. are the tax benefits, looking at estate planning, looking at wills, getting married, especially in the cultural way. What does it mean? Looking at the marriage regimes, how does it impact on you as an individual? How does it impact on the men? Looking at women's struggle, and a lot of women are stuck and can't make decisions, and a lot of women are so dependent on their husbands financially. So I look at all of this, and I just think, and I was thinking, it's sad. And I'll take a woman that I just met recently, and she had this husband who did absolutely nothing, and she gathered a whole lot of property, and they were married according to cultural rights, which was regarded as in community property. And of course things didn't work out. She had to give half of it to him, and she says, why do I have to do that? So, unfortunately, this is what the requirement is. So yes, and I'll tell you a story as well that happened during COVID. I was invited to a friend's house and for Juma lunch, and we enjoyed a lovely lunch. And here this young man comes in, and he sits down, and I look at him, and we have a chat, and I asked him what school was he at, and we start chatting, and it just so happened that my son was at the same school, and he just started talking to me and confiding me and telling me he comes from a very wealthy family, and I'm dishing out for him, and he's enjoying his food, and he's chatting away, and I asked him, so tell me about your mum. So he says, oh no, my mum committed suicide. And I looked at him, and my heart just broke. Then then I felt his hurt and pain. And I realized, and he went on talking, and then he tells me, now my dad is remarried, but she's very nice. I said, I'm sure. And then he tells me that, and he just went on and on talking, and I looked at this young man, and I realized the impact that it's had on him, and the impact of women not being able to make decisions and take accountability and responsibility for their own lives because they're so dependent on men, and the impact it has on kids. Because my whole intention is not just to help women, is to, obviously there's a ripple effect in terms of helping young people. I have a passion for young people, and they seem to be drawn to me. And so it's not just the women, it's also the young people. And at the same time, at some point, I think men also require help. And men do not face the reality because of the egos, So having started, wanting to start with the woman and then going on to the broader community, I think the impact will be huge, and that's exactly what I want to do, and I'm very passionate about it.
And what impact do you want your book to have? I know you recently wrote the Menopause and Money P.O.U.R.S, right?
Yes,
I said it right.
Yes, okay. P.O.U.R.S, P.O.U.R.S, Money P.O.U.R.S. Okay, so I did that out of fun. Okay, so I did that because I said, if I look at myself, I said, yes, if only someone told me the cost. Nobody talks about menopause, and everybody now seems to be the new hype. Menopause, everything is about menopause. But there's a financial implication, and nobody tells you about the financial implication. So I decided that let's see what happens. And it's not just for women in their 40s and 40s going into 50s, and that's premenopause, and then perimenopause, menopause, and then you get postmenopause. But but women some of them start in at 30s because their hormones start having an impact on them. But then again, financial planning doesn't start then. It starts at the age of, from the time you start working. So I say it's for 20s and beyond. Okay. So it's for everybody, because at different stages, different things happen. And you need to obviously take care of yourself. You don't want to be financially dependent on men, because you need to do things. When you're going through menopause, for example, nobody's told you about the anxiety, or nobody tells you about the hot flushes. Nobody tells you that you need to take special care of yourself. Nobody tells you that you should be seeing a dietitian. And what is it that agrees? You should be going and exercising more. And then you get the other women that want the Botox, and nothing wrong with that. If that makes them feel good, it's okay. So it's important that you become financially independent. And then, of course, you must be honest, a lot of marriages actually break up during that period as well, because men also start looking for younger women, and then the women have to face all of these challenges on their own, and they need to start creating a safety net for themselves.
Okay. So the book is aimed at all ages, basically.
And all ages, not only women.
Yes.
I think men should read this book so they won't think that their women are crazy.
I think us as women are a little.
And then the families. In fact, the children should read the book as well, because the reality is it's a book for everybody.
Yeah.
It's being quite, it's vibrant.
Yes.
It's exciting. It teaches you a bit about, again, looking at the life stages, what you should do initially, and the question that you possibly ask is, when does one start savings? What is it? What happens if you're 50 and you haven't started saving? Is it too late? It's never too late. Never. Like I always tell my daughter, she's 35. She's 34. I tell her I'm 35. So she goes, oh yeah, Mom, yeah. I said, because I feel that way, Yeah.
And something you said that you regret was not asking for help early enough in life.
Yeah. I've always been a very, very independent woman. And because, my dad always taught us to work very hard. And my mom was a very giving woman. But I also realized that, I was always very independent. And as I moved on, I empowered my helper, I empowered my gardener. I got them as my team and I obviously empowered them, got them, built them businesses and so on and so forth. But and created my own sort of network to help me with my children, being a single mom. But it could have been easier if I brought in family. But I always was very independent. But I think as you go, and the reason I say that is I was so much involved in corporate at some point, and my life was very different because I was exposed to so many different cultures. I wasn't the normal traditional Muslim lady. And I found it very difficult to readjust to get back into the community. So, and I think back and I reflect and I said it was so much easier back then, when we were back home. So from that perspective, but it also taught me a hell of a lot. So that's not too difficult because I very quickly brought myself back into the community as well.
So looking back, do you have any regrets in terms of maybe spending too much of your life being too busy, or what are your regrets if you were to look back on life?
Actually, I don't look at my life as regrets. I never do. Okay. Because I think that every challenge was a lesson. And every lesson I learned a lot from, which obviously took me to a different level. And every level taught me about an opportunity, and which I then worked on and was able to reflect on and relook at where am I, what have I done wrong, and what is it that I need to improve, and how can I change things? Yeah. So that's how I continued my life. So I have no regrets, and things happen for a reason. And I'm like, things happen. If you're not going to forgive yourself, or if you don't forgive the situation, and you don't know why people reacted in certain ways, you can't be held accountable or responsible for other people's, actions. So you just, continue doing what you need to do, and you do the best that you need to do.
And the legacy you would want to leave for your children and the community?
I think before I answer that question, I think a very important question that I think I want to say to you is, and especially for women, like my kids always said, I had a very, very, very expensive hobby. I loved property.
Yes.
So I would speculate with property and, build property and then sell it. And then I created my own portfolio. So that helped me in terms of my financial independence.
Mm-hmm.
And that created an annuity income for me. So if I look at my legacy, I think women, it's so important at any stage, at any level you are, to empower yourself with knowledge in every sense, and don't be scared. When it comes to the bigger community, get involved, help the community, whether it's a man or a woman. And men often don't talk about their feelings, and that is sad because there's so much you can help them, and they don't realize the impact that they have on their children, and what are they teaching their sons in terms of showing affection, or their daughters for that matter. So I think it's very important that we start helping them in terms of gaining knowledge, not just on making money, because that's not, to me, that is not thriving. That is not, giving back to the community. It's about what impact you're going to make in someone's life. That is important.
Yeah. And before we close off today, do you have any words of wisdom or tools that you've gathered that could help someone going forward?
I think what is important is, firstly, being totally honest, brutally honest with yourself. If you're not going to take ownership where you currently are, because currently people are struggling, in terms of whether it's financially, whether it's emotionally, people are feeling trapped. Our young people are not getting jobs, and I think it's very, very important to look at your life and say, this is where I am now. How is it? Reach out to others, because if you don't reach out, nobody's going to be there to help you. If you don't talk, and as a result, it has a rippling effect. You start creating anxiety within yourself, and you start isolating yourself. And whether, if you're not going to go out there and ask for the help, and empower yourself, even if it's via, educating yourself. And that, to me, is the biggest thing. Not only educating is one thing, but starting to take action, implementing and making. You can make mistakes. I've made so many mistakes in my life, but I just look at it as a stepping stone. But if you're not going to do that, how are you going to know what works and what doesn't work? And we, especially, coming from Indian background, for that matter. We teach our children that you need to study, be a doctor, that is what, or become, something, a lawyer or whatever the point might be. But at the end of the day, we don't empower our children with tools. And to me, that is very important in terms of entrepreneurship, because that is the way the world is going, is creating entrepreneurs. And how are we going to do that for the youngsters? Because look at our current unemployment rate. Look at our country. We need to start doing things to empower these young people. And I would love to get to that point where I can do that, and not to take away that anxiety from the young people, and to help them to source what is their passion and how can we help them.
Yeah.
And that starts with the mom at home.
That's so true. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was inspirational. I love your energy. You are so vibrant. And it was an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I'm really honored to be here with you today.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.